From a very early age, I was aware of living without electricity and then having the fortune to have it come into the house. I think the residents now, both in the country and in the city, I don't think they have any concept of what life was like then. It's amazing to me in a relatively short time. You know, I'm talking about 75 years. To come from that, my goodness, to the things now, when the electricity goes off, we think we can't live.
When old Illinois Power, they said first that when the REA came out, oh, they couldn't serve the farmers didn't use enough, see.
We lived just 2 miles from Mascoutah. They had Illinois Power, but they wouldn't come out to the farmers. Well, I'm so grateful that there was people out there that knew that the farmers were just as important as people that live in town and cities, and how important it was to have electricity to keep things running smoothly. Just so grateful that they formed the organization, the REA.
Oh, they had meetings and different things, and then there was a couple of old farmers. They went around and got the people to sign up, because at that time, the electric, $3.50 a month, and you got 40 kilowatts. Some of them said they couldn't afford it, $3.50 a month, which I tell you what, it was rough going. I know I lived through the Depression, and I know what it was. We was at home a lot of times, and I'm telling you what, in the wintertime when I was a kid and went to school, there wasn't a nickel in the house all winter.
Doris's dad had done a lot of work with C.B. Morrison in getting right-of-ways. And of course, he'd get along real well with German people because he could speak a little German.
My dad, William Nieberge, along with a gentleman named William Thien, were the people responsible for going around and getting easements. And my dad spoke German. And some of these farmers still wanted to talk in German. So I remember driving with him when he would go talk to some of these farmers. And a few forward-thinking ones were very, yes, Bill, we've heard about it and we want to be a part of it, and sure, you can go across our land. But then he found some that saw absolutely no need to have it.
The co-op was not unanimously greeted as a wonderful thing. Some people did have some reservations, some good, some bad, and some absolutely stupid. A lot of people either couldn't afford electricity or had strong political reservations against having electric power because they thought it was socialistic.
Well, I'd say about half of them didn't want it. My father was aggressive and he wanted it, so that's why he went out fighting for it. I remember back then, 40 kilowatts was all we needed, but we had no idea what it was going to be used for either.
The rural areas became alive with electricity. We lived on a farm, and we got electric in 1939. We came home. We had wired before it, and we had lights, and that's all we ever had was electric lights. Times were hard, and I remember we had a yard light on a pole, and the meter was on the pole, and the minimum that you could use a month was 40 watts. And we watched that meter like a hawk. We didn't go over 40 watts. There was no bad mouthing the REA because they were good workers, conscientious people. It was a poor time for this country. This put a lot of people to work, and it made a lot of people conscious that we were going to get over this depression that we were in.
My familiarity with Monroe County Electric Co-op actually dates back to my grandfather, Emil J. Talkie, who served on the original board of directors. Anything that was community-minded for the good of the whole, if you ask him, Emil, do you think you could support us in any way? His answer would undoubtedly be, you bet.
The manager, Mr. Douglas, he was a good friend of mine, and he was conscientious and always did a good job.
He was very strict. You couldn't, the linemen were not allowed to come in and talk to the women in the office.
Electric was my game. And like climbing in poles and changing the transformer just as fast as you could go to get that car back on again. That was C.M. Douglas's mood, get that electric back on. When I was a young boy, I watched them climb poles and stuff. I thought that was pretty neat, that you could go put on them hooks and go up the pole and work up there on the pole with just your belt around the pole. And that's what I wanted to do. Mr. Joe Kibbing, he was the foreman. And Leo Esker was a lineman, and Calvin Vogt was another lineman, then myself.
My father was the first lineman for the Monroe County RA. His name was Joseph Charles Kipping. I will say I don't think that any man could have been more dedicated to his job than my dad. When that phone rang, he'd be gone. I went with him one night. He told me to stay in the truck. He went up that pole on and hooked that transformer and then tied a rope to it. And then they come down and he left it down. Then he got another one, a new one, and then he tied it and he pulled it up and then he tied the rope to the old 46 Chevrolet to the bumper. And just the lightning and the thunder, and he'd be soaking wet. But he'd go, and lightning didn't bother him. He told me, don't get out of the truck, just stay where you're at. So, and I guess that's what made the RA, stuff like that. Mr. Douglas, he was nice. Call him Booby, old Clarence Douglas Booby. He was glad to get my dad. He knew he had a good man.
Joe was a tough old lineman. And if you couldn't climb the pole, he did, but by God, you'd better look for a different job. But he was one of those guys too for REA, for the co-op, to get them lines going, you know. And when we'd build a line, the four of us, I remember the time already when the four of us would take out 10 poles when we had a line to build. And we'd take out 10 poles and we'd set them 10 poles and make it hot that same day. But you talk about work. The old foreman, Mr. Kibbing, he always said, watch that ground wire when you go up the pole. So I went up the pole and all we had was some little short sticks to kick in the circuit breakers. See? So I was going up the pole, and when I got up there, I put my belt around it. Just about the time I put my belt around, man, it popped and cracked, and the lightning and a ball of fire went right between my legs. The old foreman said, that makes the fear of God come in you. You damn right, I tell you what. But we never did stop. I don't care how much it's lightning or nothing. You've worked with that line to get that line back on. We'd take them holes, and then we'd shut the power off for about 2 hours and set the poles and tie that line in and then make it hot again. Then in the afternoon, we'd dig the holes again. And when you dug them holes, you dug a hole. In 15 minutes, you had to have that hole done. And when you had that hole done, you got the rest going, walking to the next one.
They set the poles across Grandpa's farm and I watched them doing it. But I wasn't allowed to go out there that far, close to them or anything. So I just know they set them catty-cornered across Grandpa's farm. I just know where they're at to this day. And everybody was glad to see we were finally getting some light.
Since I was a sophomore in high school, when we got electricity, I am just so overwhelmed. I think it's a blessing. It was a joy to have indoor plumbing. We didn't have to go to the outhouse anymore.
Well, if you just figure all the things on the farm, when electric come, there was, you start cattle farmer, dairy farmer, they used to milk by hand. Now you got the milking machine. And it's just so much different. The country is lit up.
In those days, everyone thought real highly of the co-op. They really thought I had the most wonderful job, you know, to be able to work for Monroe County Electric, and I did too. We all had to try to sell security lights. We got $3 for every light we get people to sign up for. Well, I really went to town on that. After church, everyone would go down to the tavern, and we'd go too, and boy, I really hit them up for a security light. And then when they'd call in, they'd give me my name, and then I got $3 for each light they sign up. When we'd go for a ride, and then if I'd see a farm or a home that didn't have a security light, I'd jot it down, and I'd call them and try to sell them another security light.
I started farming in 1946. I bought an old farm, and I had to put in the furnace, the waterworks, everything electric. Later I got modernized and I got me an electric welder in the shop. I put grain bins and grain dryers, a bucket elevator. I could handle more grain in an hour than my dad did in a day. I wouldn't want to ever go back without electric.
We had the ice box, but to have the refrigerator was quite a deal. And to be able to make ice cubes, that was really something. Of course, in the tray, not as it's done now. And my mother insisted on getting an iron when they came in.
You could plug in an iron, you didn't have to heat it on the stove. And I remember I would like to iron and listen to the ball games. My dad was a Cardinal fan, and when you come in for the field, he would say, "Betty, who won the game today?" And I would enjoy listening to the game, listening to Dizzy Dean, and then I would enjoy listening to him singing Wabash Cannonball in the 7th inning.
We'd get to listen to things like The Lone Ranger or something like that. It was pretty good.
Ma Perkins was on radio, and I would listen to her a lot.
Amos and Andy.
I slept in a room not too far from the main living room. And my grandpa was a man that got up early. He'd go out and feed the horses and mules. And then he'd come in and he'd turn on that darn radio. And he would be dialing that darn thing, and we wanted to leave.
Territory rights, I guess, was a problem from the word go. And we heard of the spite lines, and of course there were some where the public utility would build a line. They didn't have anybody to go to. They just built a line to save for their markers when they come there.
When REA got the farmers and they finally seen that the farmers was, boy, then they started grabbing them, see. They finally found out that the farmer used more electric than what a city block did once in a while.
It was a challenge. And we were encouraged to sit down with these public utilities and draw a line. This side's yours and this side's ours. And it worked fairly well. Well, Leroy Hard was there when I got there. He was manager, and Leroy was more of an office manager, I think. He was did his job very well.
Leroy was a good people person. When he hired me, it was kind of funny, you know. He asked if I knew how to work a camera, and I said yes. Well, he handed me one of these big old graphic reflex cameras and had a battery about as big as a suitcase. And hell, when Leroy asked me if I knew how to work a camera, I said yeah, but I didn't know how to work that thing. I remember that.
I started working July the 8th, 1957. And at that time, I think we only had about 2,200 members, and the average consumption, I always remember that, was 304 kilowatt per month. I just always enjoyed accounting, and the people were always had good bosses.
Grandpa's annual meeting, for all of us, was a big deal. That's something that we really look forward to. You got to intermingle and meet and visit with your neighbors and friends.
My father persuaded me to play accordion, and I didn't realize till I was older I had no talent. And I played in front of about 400 people at one of the first, oh, more than that. I think the REA meetings used to get 900 or so. And that was probably the downside of my early recognition of the REA, so I lived through that.
Talking about memories of REA, they started when I was a child, going to the annual meetings with my parents, sitting in the bleachers of the Waterloo High School. I guess at that time it was probably Ray Roosterberg was the chairman. But the big deal was winning the prizes. There is a picture somewhere of us. I'm about 5, and I think it was a toaster we had won, and it was just like you won the lottery. So it was a pretty cool deal.
I had the opportunity to help pick and choose, and when Joe Fellon became our manager, I always remember that the statewide manager from Missouri at one of the meetings indicated to me that he thought when Joe Fellon came over to Illinois, the IQ went up in both states.
Bob said, I don't know whether I like that or not. Bob Ripplemeyer was the chairman of the board at that time, and he was a fabulous chairman, and so was Terry when he took the job. Well, the biggest challenge when I first got here on July 1st of '78 was that they had changed their billing system to go to a winter-summer rate. They also went to a wholesale power cost adjustment. At that time, members were self-billed, and they'd send in their payment from a rate chart. Then what they did is calculate what they owed if the wholesale power was different, so that the next month they would get a card saying they owed $2 or $3. And the first 2 days I was here, the phone rang off the wall. I said, what's going on? And they said, well, we didn't tell you. But we changed our rate to winter summer, and we went with this WPCA as a wholesale power cost adjustment, and he said people were just calling in right and left. After we got over that, the biggest issue then was Soyland and being involved with Illinois Power at that time in the Clinton nuclear project. That took a lot of work.
I got a couple of weeks with Joe Fellon, a man that I really admired and respected from my years at Clay. He had a presence that you know, when kind of like E.F. Hutton. When E.F. Hutton talks, you listen. Well, when Joe Fellon talked, you listen, because the guy had a lot to say, and it was great advice to take to heart.
Monroe County Electric has always been blessed with, I'd say, excellent or super managers. When I first came on, Joe Fellon was a manager. He was a man of character, a man of integrity. He was very open and honest to the people. He was a pleasure to work with. He's someone I admire greatly. He did a great job, and I think he left a legacy would never be forgotten.
I had a good board to work with, and they gave me free rein of everything, and I just can't say enough about them. And they still were great when I left here after 24 years. All the co-op people are good. All the members are good people. That's what gave me the satisfaction of being able to work with people that really cared about their cooperative and what it did for them. And that was the biggest satisfaction I had.
Back in 1993, we had the Great Flood. Well, then we all remember the picture of Mr. Gummersheimer's home being swept away by a breach in the levee, and all hell broke loose. I can remember visiting with Joe, went out on a boat, a little John boat, and onto the raging Mississippi, trying to figure out, you know, how do we power up, how do we move the lines, how do we move the loads around to get people in power. And poor Joe, I think he almost lost it. He probably got seasick that day, I think. There again, it was the dedication. I mean, what president, CEO is going to go out on a John boat on the raging Mississippi trying to figure out the best way to run a line? That just epitomizes what this co-op's all about.
We disconnected portions of our substations in advance, and then the members would move on. I think the worst thing for the girls in the office was listening to the people crying, and you know, it was kind of a sad devastation.
You know, we had this thing in '93 called the flood. Okay, there are not enough words to describe how the employees of Monroe County Electric kept us safe.
I think the first memory I've got of Monroe County Electric would have been 1944. We moved to Falls. Herman and Grace Rosenberg was our landlord. They was the ones that were responsible for electric in the area where we lived there on Ames Road. I've been well pleased with Monroe County Electric because we've had good service all the years. Well, I don't know, I think it's more friendly, and you can talk to anybody here. Where I know I had to put some electric service for my daughter in Columbia one time, and that was Illinois Power yet. You couldn't even talk to anybody. You had to talk through a speaker because they were scared of you. Here, I've never had any problem. I mean, you can talk to anybody from top to bottom here.
And after Joe Fellon came, we hired Alan Waddles, who again epitomizes what the cooperative's all about. Good people, good sound mind, good judgments.
And when Alan Waddles came on board, I think he's very courteous, very forward, has a high integrity, has great concern for his membership, is able to communicate very well with his employees and with the board itself. So Monroe County has been really blessed with its leadership throughout all the years I've been a board member.
The thing that gives me the most satisfaction about working for cooperatives is understanding the business model for cooperatives is we're member owned. We answer to the member, and when we get those thank yous and attaboys back from the membership for jobs well done, restoring the power, and that's what's the most enjoyable thing about it, that we've answered the call to the membership. They're our owners, and we're doing the very best we can for them.
I started working in Monroe County in 1968. I like working outside, and we had good crew to work with. Erman Brinkman, Calvin Volk, they called him Butts, Eddie Esker, Roland Mensch. We had a couple ice storms. It was challenging, but the ice on the poles, you climb the pole, and the ice break and you fall down, and it's a quick trip down. And you go back up again, well, it's rough. You gotta be extra careful.
Memories of the 2006 ice storm. That was probably the worst ice storm that I'd been through. And it just kept coming. The ice just never moved out. You know, it just stayed and stayed and stayed. It just seemed like all heck broke loose and everything was starting to go out, and trees were falling and lines were falling. And it was my birthday because I had one of the linemen call me and say, "Happy birthday, boss," and I get to work.
I was out and I got to go out with some of the guys on outages because there was 3, 4, 5 days worth of outages. And unless you saw these guys firsthand do what they did, the effort they put forth, the, you know, how they went about their business, they didn't want to sleep. They didn't want to take a break. Their focus was genuinely on getting this power back as fast as they could. And that is something that I will never forget.
Well, I think the neatest part of being served by Monroe County Electric is you really know who your linemen are. You know them personally, you know their name, they know you, they know where you live, they know your needs.
We always tried to give the best service that we possibly could, and it seemed like the members really appreciated that. And I think it was strictly because of the service that some of our older linemen gave to the members.
We know how important it is to get our youth involved in community activities, to get them involved in things like the co-op that really provide a lot of education for them. And our youth trips to Springfield and the youth trip to Washington is fabulous. The feedback that we get from the people that go on these programs is just wonderful.
I remember the high school classroom I was in when the morning announcements indicated that there would be an opportunity for students interested in government and politics to try to earn a trip to Washington, D.C. That experiment gave me the opportunity to meet even more individuals and an opportunity to spend more time with my peers, students from around Illinois who were interested in subjects such as government and politics. We had a great time, we had a lot of fun, made a lot of great friendships, but more importantly, it cemented in me the enthusiasm to be involved in public affairs.
I think it's just a great tool to help us educate the future leaders that will maybe come into play and be leaders of a co-op, whether it be a director or an employee or a CEO or a lineman. They have a kind of a base of working knowledge of what a co-op is.
But I later moved in the country and became a co-op member. That was also many years ago, and decided how nice it was to have a power, shall we say, affordable power. Well, I think you have to keep up with the times, which is hard to do, but things change. I won't say daily, but they keep changing. Power changes, your power costs change, everything changes, and you really have to keep up with all of them if you really want to do your job as a director.
But I think all the members, if they would get more involved in the annual meeting, Member Appreciation Day and such things, I think they would have a different view of the co-op.
My most satisfaction is to keep our members supplied with power, to solve their problems, and understand their issues as much as we can. I think that Monroe County Electric tries to meet everybody's needs in our territory. If any people have any problems, just please let us know. We're to help and try to solve any problem that you have.
You actually do have a say, and you do have a right and a responsibility actually to participate and to, be part of that cooperative.
The biggest benefit of being a member of a co-op is that you are actually the owner of the co-op. What happens with the business is all directly affected on you. To be a part of that, I think, is tremendous. I think it's one of the best business models there is. The members themselves actually own the company.
Being around the board members I've been around, Kenny Stumps, Walter Amons, Metters, Glibers, I mean the list goes on and on. The one thing that always was the same was that they were, number one, they were good people, good business minds, but they understood the cooperative principle. and that their only purpose when they came into the boardroom was to what would benefit the members. And when you come in with that simple approach to pretty complex issues, it makes your job much easier. The dedication of these people, it's still the same as it was 75 years ago. They still have a purpose. They understand it's the membership they're working for, and I've always been very proud of the cooperative people, and it was a treat for me to be a part of it.
And I think the co-ops were started by people who looked at the total picture, and they just didn't look at it for their own self-centered interests. They wanted to see progress made. They weren't in it for their own personal gain. Seeing things keep getting better and better just makes you feel good. You think, well, maybe I was just a tiny bit of that.